Imagine you are sitting beside a fire right now. Not a fireplace, not a backyard grill, a real fire in open air on cold ground with smoke rolling directly into your face. You shift. The smoke follows. You shift again. It follows again. Everybody around the fire laughs because everybody around the fire has always laughed at that. Now, here is the strange part. That moment, that exact irritating, eye-watering, smoke-following-you moment has been happening to human beings for so long that we do not actually know when it started. And the story of how smoke entered human life and what it did to us when it got there is almost nothing like what you have been told. The common version goes something like this. Humans discovered tobacco, they smoked it, they got addicted, and eventually a corporate machine turned that addiction into a global crisis. That is the story. Cigarettes, cancer, the Marlboro Man. You know the arc. That version is wrong. Almost completely wrong. Not about the cancer. The cancer is real. But about when the relationship between humans and smoke actually began, and what it meant, and why your body responds to it the way it does. On all of that, the standard version is missing roughly 100,000 years of context. Let us start with fire itself. The current best evidence suggests that Homo sapiens, and possibly our predecessors, were using controlled fire somewhere between 400,000 and 1 million years ago. The site at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa contains evidence of fire use dating back approximately 1 million years, analyzed by Francesco Berna and his colleagues in a 2012 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. 1 million years. That is not an abstraction. That is 40,000 generations of human beings sitting beside smoke every single night. So before tobacco, before ritual, before any intentional inhalation of anything. Your ancestors were breathing smoke constantly. It was not a choice. It was a condition of survival. The fire kept you warm, cooked your food, kept predators away. And the smoke came with it. Here is what that does to a body over time. Researchers studying modern populations who cook over open fires, including work published by Kirk Smith at the University of California, Berkeley, have found measurable adaptations in lung tissue, immune response, and even olfactory processing in people with generations of smoke exposure. The body is not passive about this. It adjusts. It builds tolerance. It begins to associate the smell of combustion with safety, with warmth, with the presence of other people. Your brain was wired over hundreds of thousands of years to find the smell of smoke calming, not alarming, calming. That is the first thing the standard story skips entirely. Now let us get to the plant. Tobacco, the genus Nicotiana, is native to the Americas. Indigenous peoples in North and South America were cultivating and using it at least 12,000 years ago, and some archaeobotanical evidence suggests even earlier. But the oldest direct evidence of tobacco use in human remains comes from a 2021 study led by Darren Duke and his team at the Desert Archaeology firm, who found tobacco seeds in a fire pit at the Wishbone site in the Great Salt Lake Desert of Utah, dated to approximately 12,300 years ago. The seeds were charred. Someone had burned tobacco deliberately in that fire. This is the oldest confirmed physical evidence of intentional tobacco use, 12,300 years ago. But here is what makes that finding strange in a specific way. Those early users were not smoking tobacco in anything resembling the way you picture it. There were no pipes yet in that region at that time. The current archaeological consensus is that the tobacco was burned in fire and the smoke was inhaled directly, or the leaves were chewed, or both. The ritual and the habit preceded the technology by thousands of years. Let me throw something at you. There is a hypothesis taken seriously by researchers in evolutionary pharmacology, including work discussed by Edward Hagen at Washington State University, that human tobacco use may have begun not as a pleasure-seeking behavior, but as a deliberate act of parasite control. Nicotine, in its natural form inside a tobacco leaf, is a potent insecticide. Plants evolved it specifically to kill insects that feed on them. And some researchers argue that early humans may have used tobacco, along with dozens of other nicotine-bearing plants found across multiple continents, as a way of managing intestinal worm loads. Parasites were a significant cause of death in ancient populations. A substance that stunned or killed those parasites would have had measurable survival value. Pleasure might have come later, Self-medication may have come first. Sit with that for a moment. The thing that eventually became a trillion-dollar addiction industry may have started as medicine against intestinal worms. Now, here is the turn that the story almost never takes. When European colonizers arrived in the Americas and encountered tobacco use, they did not find a casual habit. They found a deeply integrated ceremonial practice embedded in political life, healing traditions, spiritual ritual, and social negotiation across hundreds of distinct cultures. For many indigenous peoples, tobacco was not recreational. It was sacred, offered to the earth, shared to mark agreement, burned to carry prayers upward. The smoke was a medium. And what happened next is one of the more uncomfortable facts in the history of a substance. European merchants stripped the ceremonial context entirely, brought the plant back across the Atlantic, and within a few generations had turned it into a commodity product severed completely from any meaning it had carried for 12 millennia. They then spent centuries building economic systems that depended on enslaved African labor to grow it at scale. The tobacco economy in the colonial Americas was one of the central engines of the Atlantic slave trade. Hundreds of thousands of people died producing a plant whose original keepers had used it to speak to the sky. That is the uncomfortable turn. The story of ancient human smoking runs directly through that. And then, much later, the industry that grew from that colonial economy spent decades suppressing scientific evidence that its product caused cancer, funding research designed to produce doubt, targeting advertising at people with the fewest resources to resist it. The playbook documented in the Minnesota tobacco litigation of the 1990s and analyzed by historian Robert Proctor in his book Golden Holocaust revealed internal memos going back to the 1950s showing that major tobacco companies knew and chose to conceal. So here is where the whole arc lands. You have a species that spent 1 million years breathing smoke involuntarily, who then found a plant that mimicked what that smoke did to the brain but with more precision and more intensity, who wrapped that plant in ceremony and meaning for 12,000 years, who had that ceremony stripped away and replaced with commerce, who then had the evidence of harm buried for decades. Somewhere in that chain, something that began around a fire in the open air, involuntary, communal, warm, became something you buy alone in a gas station in a small cardboard box. Tonight, if you sit beside a fire, and the smoke finds you the way it always does, and you feel that ancient pull to stay close anyway, that is not weakness. That is 100,000 years of association, still running. The fire is warm. The smoke is part of the warmth. Your ancestors knew that. The fire is still there.